Hi everyone. I am Bhavishya, and I would be speaking on this topic for on content creation, uh, AI for content creation, fueling marketing success. So basically, before we move ahead, I would quickly want to walk you all through the things that we would be discussing. So basically, my presentation is divided into four sections. The first one is to set up the context to understand what exactly history of marketing is, and then we would understand what generative AI is and the rise of generative AI. Then in this section, the second section, we would be understanding why is there a need of generative AI, right? The third section talks about AI for content creation. We would understand how generative AI is being used for content creation and what is the like technicalities behind it in simple terms. And lastly, we would see if there are any ethical challenges or challenges in general from that standpoint, and we would try to see why that is important, right? So let's get started. Uh, let's go to the history of marketing, right? So history of marketing starts basically way back than people realize. It started from 1500 BC from the Mesopotamian societies, where these people actually used to have logos on their products so that people would remember them, right? So that people would understand that this product is from a certain brand or from a certain entity. This was you can consider this as an early form of logo system, because it was very important for these organizations or entities to have to establish a brand. And this logos or stamps that these entities used to have on their products acted as a quality metric. So if people would want to buy a product of similar quality, they would have to go to that logo, the same logo. So it worked like that in earlier days. Now let's move ahead to the next part. Uh, okay, from logos, how did we move to printing books and all of that, right? So that happened in the 15th century, right? When the invention of printing press happened and printing press was introduced to the world, uh, where people now have gotten the ability to print and publish things. So consequently, this marked the inception of the earliest form of print advertisement, right? So we can see that there have been advancements ever since, but the early stage advancements were from 15th century to the early 18th century. If we move to the next section, we have two different subsections. The first one talks about the time period from 1700s to 1920. The prominent thing that was happening at this time was magazines, billboards, outdoor advertisements, etc. Uh, to tell you, magazines, billboards, and outdoor advertisements were very oftenly used, and they were used as a medium to reach out to people. Now, earlier, what they had to do was they had to product themselves out, right? And stamps and logos were there. But people would come to know only when they would buy your product. They're not getting to know you, get getting to know your product automatically, right? So in a scenario like such, what and how this print advertisement helps is you can simply, if you're walking somewhere, you're just able to see them like that, right? So they do not necessarily have to buy anything, but still the brand awareness is there, right? So the first recorded newspaper advertisement appeared in the Boston newspaper, and if we see the Coca-Cola's ad campaigns in the late 19th century played a significant role in establishing a brand as an iconic beverage. Uh, and because of this print advertisements, Coca-Cola also had a partnership with U.S. Army in World War One, I think, and World War Two. So also these prints have always been helpful in spreading out the word for societal good, like empowering women, for equal rights, votes, and all of that, anti-slavery slogans, anti-slavery movements, and all of that, all of these things. After that, from 1920s to 1990s, if we see, marketing through radios and ad televisions started picking up its pace. The first print radio advertisement was aired in 1922, where it was a 10-minute advertisement, 10-minute long advertisement, and AT&T had paid $100 for that. It got so much traction that by 1930s, almost 90% of these radio stations were advertising, right? It was prominent again until 1941 when the first TV advertisement was aired. Let's move on to our uh, last section, which is from 1990s to present. So basically, this marks as the current phase of advertisement, and it is very important because it actually helped us towards that online advertisement. And from here on, we would see the role of generative AI after this section. So you can see in this timeline that from 1960s to 1990s, almost the emergence of internet was happening, and after that, so this development of the internet laid down the foundation for the online advertisement that we see today. And then we in the late 1990s we see growth of search engines. Google, Yahoo, and all these things were taking their own positions, where search engines like Google actually played a pivotal role. They introduced pay-per-click model through Google AdWords. Then 2000s, people started coming to know about social media platforms like Friendster, MySpace, which was then dominated by players like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So these social media platforms actually acted as major marketing platforms as well, where brands, because these brands knew that they have a lot of footfall on, there are a lot of active users, so these brands were advertising there as well. By 2000s, since a lot of people were using social media platforms, of course there were few people who actually had gotten really good in their audience as users. So they were called influencers, they were called as influencers, and from then influencer marketing had taken its place. The popularity of influencers on platforms like Instagram and YouTube actually led to a new form of advertisement, which we now know as influencer marketing, where brands collaborate with these influencers because of their significant audience. So this was to quickly set up the context uh, of advertisement and marketing, and we'll quickly move on to the rise of Gen AI section, the second section of this talk. But before we move ahead, we want to understand what basically is generative AI, right? So this section basically answers your what and why of generative AI. So what is generative AI first? Generative AI basically is just uh, simply using AI or AI tools to generate information, right? It can be in the form of images, it can be in the form of text, music, etc. Right? Now you might ask, okay, how is generation different from prediction? Prediction basically is you already have that data existing, or you know that that data would come in near future, and you are predicting based on something which is already existing. Generation basically is something which is not in existence and you are just generating it, right? So you're bringing it into existence. So where the AI pulls out its wand and shows you the magic how it can generate things by its own. So yep, that's about it. This is an introduction to generative AI. Why is this important? And all of that. Before we move ahead to that, we need to understand a few milestones, few important dates in terms of generative AI, right? So that actually helps you understand the things which more or less indirectly answers why do we need it. So Google's Deep Dream team actually generated artistic images using neural networks back in 2014. This showcased an early capability of generative AI. Then if we move to 2019, right? Uh, GPT-3 showcased its unprecedented language generation capabilities with 175 billion parameters. Kid you not, that's too much. So that's of 2019, mind you. If we come to 2021, GPT-4 and DALI had taken the world by storm because of its image generation and natural language understanding capabilities. These researches, groundbreaking researches and products have come from, of course, OpenAI, and they have been very, very famous. It's like, as I'm not able to remember that statistic clearly, but I think within 5 days they had got 1 million users on their platform, which is by far the highest. Uh, so because of these capabilities and access to information so easily, uh, even Google was afraid, and that is exactly why Google also jumped in for they started investing in Anthropic and other entities so that they can also support their generative researches, right? So that they are not out of competition, because this thing, generative information, was actually ChatGPT, exactly, to be precise, was competing directly with Google's search engine, and Google's search revenue is almost 80% of their total revenue. So that was too much at risk. So that is exactly why they jumped onto it. So if we see in 2022, because of this advancements in generative AI, a lot of people started discussing about the ethical concerns, especially because of deepfakes and all of that, and privacy and security of a lot of celebrities and women in general, because people were morphing their faces in onto images or videos that were very inappropriate. So this section we would be covering in the last part of this presentation, which is the ethical concerns. Let's quickly move ahead to, of course, we were discussing about OpenAI, right? So we would, of course, we would have Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. Uh, I personally got intrigued by all these things because of OpenAI and GPT, to be very honest. So till now, we have understood what is generative AI, what are a few, okay, we have understood the dates also, what they have achieved. But why is it important, right? That is exactly where we uh, answer that question. So, generative AI basically increases your profitability and improves your productivity. How? Because now you'd be able to generate solutions, you'd be able to build solutions that generate responses with minimal efforts. It is easier to automate things now. Not exactly job cuts, the kind of job roles would now change. But now you can automate a lot of things, and because of this generation ability, especially natural language understanding, generation, and processing. Now, even chatbots can interact with humans in a way where you'd feel that as if a human is talking, right? So, of course, when we have a lot of these things where someone is generating an AI tool is generating your code, is debugging your code, etc., etc., it increases and improves your productivity. You wouldn't have to do all those same things again because you already have a system where you can simply generate the code and etc. So as I said, it also creates new types of job opportunities. And since the access of information has been even more easier than ever before, it again gives us an opportunity to upskill ourselves. So uh, what can you generate? Right. Uh, as I said, we can have image generation, which would actually help. So DALI is for there, right? Text generation, we have a lot of other platforms like ChatGPT is there. We have Hugging Faces platform, Hugging Chat, I think the name is. We have Llama, which is an open source. I'm sorry, an LLM, which is responsible for text generation, helps you with text generation. And since Meta has uh, democratized and has put out its large language model for commercial use, you can now build applications for almost any task of yours, which is very impressive. Then we have music generation. So basically, you can generate music. And how is it helpful in marketing? We'll have a look at it. So basically, these for music, yeah, for music, we have Music LM, which is a package, a tool by Meta. We also have tools coming out from Google and all of these things. So I would want you to keep a check on that. It is a very hot space, and it definitely would be helping us all out. So let's move ahead with the next section, which is AI for content creation. Right. Now, this section basically helps you understand how different domains of Gen AI work, especially in marketing, and what are the technicalities. We'll just have an overview of it, and we'll understand what the technicalities are and how do these things work. So let's move ahead. So basically, we were talking about image generation, text generation, and music generation, right? So your image generation would basically help in generating banners for your advertisement, right? So how is this helpful? Earlier, you were having a dedicated team for that, right? Now you do not really have to have it. You can empower your existing team with softwares like such so that you would not need more people. Probably roles would change a bit, but yes, it definitely helps. Earlier you used to think a lot, but now uh, you won't have to think that much because an artificial system, artificial intelligence enabled system is already there, which uses its own creativity for this. Would be able to generate a lot of images for you based on the prompts that you give. Now, text generation. Let's say you have a product, you want to generate a product description. This text generation will actually help you out in that. So, apart from that, let's say you want to build a chatbot where it is interacting with the users, right? And now you wouldn't have to have a simple chatbot where you're just showing frequently answered questions and facts and all of that, right? Uh, you probably won't even have that need to hire a lot of uh, these people, call center peoples who would be executives who would serve customers, right? You can simply have it trained on your own data, and they would be able to solve your queries. For music generation, let's say you have uh, an advertisement and you need a background music, right? Music generation would exactly be able to help you out with that. Just give them the context. What do you want to do? And if you want to have some kind of a jingle, right? That would be it would be able to generate it for you. Isn't it fascinating? Right. So uh, let's move ahead and see uh, how image generators work, yeah, right? So basically, image generation comprises of usually three things in general from an overview point: neural style transfer, diffusion models, and GANs. All right. So you can understand neural style transfers basically from this thing that it combines the style of one image with the another, and another in the sense with the content that is being provided by the author, right? It can be in the form of text, it can be in the form of another image that is being provided, right? Now, generative adversarial networks, GANs, basically it involves two neural networks. One is a generator and the other one is a discriminator, where generator tries to generate images and the other one distinguishes the images. The discriminator has to distinguish the real one from a fake one. The job of a generator is to fool a discriminator and to generate images so that it becomes harder for the discriminator to distinguish between those images. Uh, then we have diffusion models, right? How do these diffusion models work? Is they start with a random image and they gradually add noise to it until the image becomes unrecognizable, and after that it tries to reduce the noise, remove the noise step by step so that it can reach to its original image. So this is what diffusion models do in general, and and this is exactly how image generators work. uh, the benefit of image generation is you can put your creativity to test, and because of that randomness that we have in these black box models, it actually helps you get a lot of vast variety. So let's say if you want to have an image of a parrot sitting on a tree in the style of Picasso, for example, you'd be able to get that very easily. So uh, these image generating tools help us out in this. And from the context of marketing, they help us in banner generation. Earlier, which used to take a lot of time, now it won't. And you can actually plug in a lot of other photo editing tools with that. And a lot of actually photo editing tools are now giving you support of these things, like Canva. You can generate images of yours in Canva. We have Adobe Photoshop, and all of these things. uh, we also have Adobe Firefly, which basically empowers the user to generate in its own image. So do check them out, they are really awesome. Let's move ahead to the text generation. So, what are the building blocks? How does it happen, right? What are the stages? So, mind you, we have, since it is an AI, everything falls under the domain of AI. We have some data, we have some pre-processing that is being done, right? We all know all of that, right? But what actually is interesting is to understand how these things work, right? So there is some pre-training that happens, which of course is after the data collection, pre-processing, and all of that, right? So basically, LLMs, which stand for large language models, they learn statistical relationships between words and phrases. They develop an understanding of grammar and other semantic coherence. Now, once that is done, based on the prompting. So let's say I have written a prompt which involves some prompt engineering. To the people who might, which is very unlikely, but still, if you're not aware, prompt engineering is basically a way of communicating with a large language model so that it becomes very easy for the large language model to respond to your query accurately. Right? So it's like the conversation that we are having right now. You are able to understand every bit of it. Why? Because I'm communicating in a language which is common to both of us, right? The syntax is common, the way I talk is common, the language is common, and I am trying to generalize or cover every aspect of it, so which makes it easier for you to understand, right? So this is exactly what we have to do when we are interacting with LLMs. So prompting basically is LLMs generate new text based on the prompts that you have written, and prompts basically can range from a single word to even a story outline or paragraph. It can be anything. Now, after that is done, what happens is at the back end, what happens is decoding is the last stage of it, where it selects the most likely word sequence which which has to come after that specific word, based on the probability distribution. After that, it considers the word frequency, grammatical constraints, and overall coherence, and then the generated output is shown or presented to the user. Lastly, in this, we have music generation, where how we would want to understand the model and the architecture behind music generation. So, architecture and model is basically common, not exactly common, but it is something, the base is common, right? With generation, we just try to generate the next node, right? Or the next word or the next section of the image, something like that, right? So in these three sections, I have tried to explain different things and how they work. In this, the model generation and architecture behind music generation, we basically have three varieties. Again, GAN has come, just like always. We have autoregressive models and variational autoencoders as well, where autoregressive models predict the next node or the chord based on the previous ones, right? And they are simple and efficient, but may result in repetitive or predictable music, right? And that is exactly why it is not very oftenly used, because there has to have some highs, some lows, some randomness, some spikes, or something which the user would be able to relate to, or any emotional trait. So that some kind of variety is required, right? So we then have variational autoencoders, where basically it learns from a latent space representation, and it captures stylistic and structural features from the music. It basically generates more it generates more creative and diverse music than autoregressive models. After that, we have generative adversarial networks, GANs again. Again, the generator creates the music. The discriminator has to distinguish from the fake one. It produces really highly creative music and original music, but it can be challenging to train, as it is very high on competition and cost. So this is something that we actually have to look onto. but this is basically how it works. In this, we have understood how generative AI is being used for marketing, how it can be used for marketing. Your image generation can be used for generating banners or advertisements along with humans, or to try to add on some effects onto the image. Your text generation is basically to generate the content that should be there in the image or that banner, or probably for product description or to interact with the customer, right? And for music generation, we have, let's say, if you want to have some background music in your video or any television kind of an advertisement, now it can be generated using music generation. Lastly, let's move on to the ethical challenges of generative AI, and that'll be very quick. I think we are running short on time. So basically, the ethical challenges, we have mainly four ethical challenges when we use generative AI. The first one is bias and discrimination. Where why is that? Because generative AI, the models that you are using is built on some data, right? And that data has been collated by us humans. We are bound to have biases. We are bound to have uh, sections where we discriminate on certain things, which is not good, of course. But these things do exist. So to collect data and to pre-process data for these models, it is very essential that there is a check so that we minimize the biases and discrimination. The other challenge is privacy and security. As I was telling you earlier, a lot of instances have come out where the images of people, especially women, have been morphed onto an existing video or an image in an inappropriate position, which actually is a privacy breach and is a threat to security. So such things are supposed to be supposed to oppose them as much as we can. And of course, there have been researches going on this field, so that which actually helps us identify such morphings in a more uh, efficient manner, so that the breaches or privacy breaches or security threats can be reduced, can be minimized as much as we can. Lastly, we have transparency. And the second last, we have transparency and explainability, which basically is, I do not know what it is generating, the tool is generating, right? How it is generating, because it's a black box model. So there is a need of explainability tools which helps us understand why a certain output was generated, and we should have the sources where it was being referred from, and it has paraphrased in case of a text generation. It has paraphrased and then being presented out to me. So that is very important. Lastly, misinformation. So now, since everyone can generate their information, or anyone can generate the content by themselves, the content generation has become easier than ever before. So everyone can generate, anyone can generate. So it is very, very important for us to identify misinformation, so that we prevent a lot of uh, riots and all these movements which are not good for our society. So in conclusion, uh, generative AI is extremely good and helpful to us, especially in marketing. It helps you generate content. I personally create a lot of my content using generative AI for my LinkedIn posts, and I really find it very, very helpful. I am in the process of building my own pipeline where uh, everything gets automated in my content generation cycle. It is very helpful to me, and the organizations that I've worked for, it is being adopted very, very smoothly over there, and organizations across the world, they value it. So we of course understand that there is a need of generative AI, but there should have a section of ethical concerns where the ethical concerns are being addressed. So that is why we need responsible AI for ethical development and use of artificial intelligence in a way where it prioritizes fairness, transparency, and minimizes biases to ensure positive societal impact. I hope this talk of mine was value adding to you and you have learned something new from it. Uh, I would end my talk. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we can surely connect on LinkedIn. I have mentioned my LinkedIn username, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Bhavishya. It was a great pleasure talking to you and listening to your insights about generative AI and how you have been using AI in your LinkedIn posts and everything. The audience will be taking a lot of valuable lessons from it. Is there anyone who would want to ask questions? Mohammad Arshad sir is raising his hand, so I think he will first go with the questions. Forward to you, sir.
Yeah. So can I? Okay. Thank you, Bhavishya, for the wonderful presentation. My question for you is for because of this content vomiting that is happening right now because of these AI tools. When I say this, you may also have experienced that there are a lot of content that is vomiting. When I say people are just putting up lot of AI generated content, uh, and as you know, being a data scientist, what I understand is uh, if a person is not creating his own. See, how is this generative AI so useful right now? Is because of the maybe 20 to 30 years of creativity of individuals, correct? All of us who were doing the post, who were writing, they are using from there and they are putting up in their information. And there was a report that a lot of uh, content earlier on also was a plagiarism. They used to repurpose the content and put it, but now the percentage has increased a lot because of generative AI. And there is a lot of garbage in right now. And how do you think, like, what is the way forward for these AI, tools, like social media tools, to uh, flag these type of content and try to encourage creativity more so that people write on their original thoughts in their post and just not doing copy pasting? And it's a very sad thing that while doing the copy pasting from chat gpt, some of the creators, they also don't forget to they copy the chat gpt thing also. Like when you ask the chat gpt a question, they even copy the chat gpt part and paste it. They don't have the this thing to even delete that. And that is the way we are going forward. So what are your thoughts on that? uh, because this is more of a culture thing that is also there, and your advice to the people who are doing this, and the way forward for social media, to because many of my followers are now telling that there is a lot of rubbish on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all these platforms, because everything is generated through these tools and there is no value that is coming out. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Mohammed. And I would say that I'd try to answer your question step by step. So the first thing that you have asked me is to how to identify whether something is being generated from, I mean, from a Gen AI tool or not. So in my understanding, there is research that is being going on, which actually helps to identify the content which is being generated from a Gen AI tool, whether the person actually has written it or it is generated from the basically some place, right? Even LinkedIn offers now generative AI content. Basically, you simply just have to write your own prompt, and it would be able to generate basically a draft for you. So in a scenario like such, what we can have is all these organizations or tools that are generating, right? They should have some kind of a watermark system where it tells you that, okay, this thing is being generated and you can take it with a pinch of salt, right? It is not a human who has written it, but has it has been generated by some AI tool, right? Apart from that, there are a few tools in the market. I know I'm able to remember only one, but there are a few tools that I've had read. And the first one is GPT-0, which actually helps you identify and distinguish between this generated AI tool, I mean, generative AI content based versus the person who has generated it, right? So that is one thing. And as far as addressing your second question, how do we make sure that, or how do we educate people uh, in terms of content creation on LinkedIn platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, etc.? What we can basically do is we can simply educate them by having courses, or by, of course, by producing content, or by addressing them in a way so that we tell them generative AI should be used as a skeleton to your body, right? Once that skeleton is prepared, you can use your own vocabulary, your own creativity, or your own language, or your own touch to make the content even more appealing. So the way I use generative AI is, if I want to have a specific draft or a skeleton around something. I give them the idea. I put in all the features or all the things or the statistics that I wanted to include. I research my own figures, I research my own statistics, I then give it to it, and then it generates a rough draft for me. On the basis of that draft, I see whether I want to change the headline, whether I want to add an additional hook for the user to read, or anything like that. So basically, the output that I get from generative AI, although it is pre-processed in the terms of the tool, but not for my use case. If I want it to fit in my use case, I have to pre-process it again, or process it again, basically. So post-processing, you'd call it. So that is exactly what I do, and that is exactly what I would suggest people who are using such tools to create content that they should also do. But yes, it is definitely a boost to your productivity, and I am in favor of using these platforms until and unless you are not harming or defaming anyone using these tools. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.